Hi, on the Woodpecker today, I'm making a crazy box for Frankie. I hope we won't have to commit him because of that. I bet you remember the cryptext I made for Frankie last year. I had such a blast making this puzzle that I've decided to make another one this year. So I've designed this box. From the outside, there's nothing too special. But if you look inside, well, it's another story. The first thing I do is the 6 rings for the 2 different locks combinations. So after sticking my patterns on a piece of plywood, I drill all the axes. Then I roughly cut the circles. When I'm done, I cut a length of dowel, a bit shorter than 6 layers of plywood. Then I stick all the rings on top of each other with double-sided tape, and I use a dowel to keep them aligned with each other. Next, I can put that on the lathe and turn all the rings at the same time. Then I unstick them 2 by 2 and cut a notch for the piece of wood which will engage the next ring. When I'm done, I unstick them and remove the rest of the tape and paper. Now I can plane a piece of maple to the width of the notches. Then rip this to width. But before gluing them in place, I roughly cut the maple longer than what I need and glue them. While the glue dries, I can start to work on the support which will hold the rings in place. This will hold together by finger joints, but the pieces are way too small for my box joint jig. So I make the fingers with the bandsaw. Okay, making the finger like that is not as accurate as the jig. I have to work on the joint a bit. When it's done, I drill a hole on both backs. Then I turn a tenon at the end of both axes the size of this hole. Now I have to take care of the washers, which will be between each ring. After making their shape, I drill a center hole. Next, I have to make all the same operations I did for the rings. Now that I have the washers, I can better figure out the length of the pieces of maple. Since they're all too long, I sand them to the right length. Now I can finally cut the 6 sides of the box. I cut all of them with the CNC. This way, I'm sure the size and the holes are exactly where they need to be. When I'm done with the plywood, I do the same with the 5 buttons. But for those, I only make a shallow cut and the corners holes. Then I carve my logo on them. The round buttons have a triangle to point the combination. Okay, this took a while, but these are all the pieces I need. Now I have to finish the cuts on the buttons. I begin by cutting one side of the square button. The rest is cut on the bandsaw. Next, the triangle cuts. Both circles are cut on my old bandsaw, just because this one has a smaller blade. Now I have all the pieces I need and more. But I still need to sand them to the right size. Yes, I've tried to plane them before sanding. But this was far from being a success. So after this failure, I've decided it was easier to sand them instead. This is quite simple. I sand up until the router bit marks are all gone and check if they fit inside the hole in the plywood. I do this for all the buttons, even the round ones. As you can see with the router bit marks, my progress is easy to follow. Good. My round buttons have the right size. I need to glue them to their first ring. But before that, I need to mark their center and drill a hole. Next, I can glue both pieces together. I check if the hole of the ring is at the same place as the one for the button, then I clamp this. While the glue dries, I can rip some walnut to make all the corners of the box. I cut a bunch, even more than what I need. Next, on those, I cut 2 grooves. After cutting the first groove, I check carefully to cut the second groove on the right side. After a while, I have enough. And like I said, even more than what I need. Now I need to cut 12 pieces exactly the same. I begin by making the first 45-degree cut. Turn the piece of wood, align the laser on the tip, and make the second cut. This is what the cut should look like. The point is exactly on the exterior corner. Then I switched for the other 45. Push the side up to the stop I had put in place before and make the first cut. Then I turn the piece and with the point well pushed on the block, I make the second cut. This doesn't take much time and I have all the pieces I need for the box. To help me, I glue all 4 pieces on both pieces of plywood with the round hole in the center. After spreading a bit of glue inside the groove and on each end, I push my glue up to one corner of a square to make sure I have this corner square. Then I check the other corners with a square and leave both glue ups alone. While this dries, I cut some pieces for the support that will hold the pushing rods later. I cut a bunch of identical rectangles. Since the hole is square and in the center of all those pieces, I stick them together and I'm set for cutting the holes. First, I set the saw blade half the height of the hole and cut the center. Turn the pieces end for end and make the other cut. Then I move the rip fence and do the same thing again. When I have the right width, I unstick the pieces and check if the hole is really square. Since it is, I can glue the pieces 2 by 2. I do the same thing for the smaller square holes and leave this to dry for the rest of the day. The next morning, just to check if this will work like I've thought, I assemble the cube. Perfect! This is starting to be exciting. But before going any further, I need to finish both locking mechanisms. The first thing I do is drill a hole for the small wire to hold the dowels in place. It's going well. I'm really confident. But when I put both supports in place, I can see that the sides are too long because I don't have the width I want between them. I take this apart and remove some wood. Perfect. Next thing to do is the small blocks, which will hold the sides in place. When they're done, I glue them in place. Then leave this alone to dry. Next, I clean up the blocks that will hold the buttons. I have some double stick tape and glue to remove. But all the buttons have to be able to fit inside those blocks, so I need to mark where I need to make the recess. After laying the block in the center, I turn this around and trace the triangular shape on the block. All this has to go. The ideal tool for that would be a small router, like the one I need to bring back to the repair shop again. Instead, I'm going to use a CNC again. So after sending the command, I just need to be a little patient. The job is not done yet. I still need to clean all the corners. In the end, I check if the button fits. One done. But I'm not done yet. I have another triangular button. When both are done, I can glue them in place. But since I want their holes aligned with the one in the plywood, I lay the button in place before putting the plywood, then I put some clamps. While the glue dries, I check what I need to remove on the blocks that are already glued and remove some wood. Now that I'm satisfied that this will work, I glue this inside the box. But I'm not done removing wood. I also have one square button. Okay, I just have to do the same thing I did for the triangles. I still need to wait for the glue to dry. The cube is going well, but I need to do something for the big compartment hole. I begin by cutting more walnut for the interior walls. But I only need thin strips of wood, so I rip thin strips. Before I can glue this in place, I trace the shape of the interior. But without any additional support, it will be very difficult to glue it in place. So I rip some useless piece of wood into small blocks. But before gluing them in place, I cut the sides to length. Okay, now I can glue the blocks. While the glue is drying, I rip all the square pieces that make the locking mechanism. After another test, I think I'll have something very nice in the end. Now that the glue is dry, I can cut the excess out of the additional support block. To finally glue all of them in place. I think it's more complicated than I had anticipated in the beginning. So I'm going to stop part 1 here. So if you want to see the crazy box completed, you have to come back to the Woodpecker.